The story of Jesus' resurrection is full of mysteries and events that make the heart race. Imagine the scene: an empty tomb, the stone rolling away, and the earth trembling underfoot. What really happened on that Sunday morning? Between the silence and disbelief, reports emerge that defy logic and invoke a reverent fear. Think for a moment about how the disciples felt when they discovered that the Master, who had been crucified, was alive. And it doesn't stop there. There are accounts of inexplicable phenomena that left marks on history and faith. Did you know that even nature seemed to react to the resurrection? How can this be explained? And the appearances? What about the people who claim to have seen Jesus after his death? These are stories that make us question, what do we really know about that crucial moment? Get ready to explore these impactful events that go beyond human comprehension. Pull up a chair, turn up the volume, and dive into this intriguing journey where faith and mystery intertwine in a surprising way. The Earth Tremor. Imagine the scene: a normal day, but an extraordinary event is about to happen. When Jesus breathes his last, the earth trembles as if waking from a long sleep. This is what the Gospel of Matthew tells us, describing an earthquake that is not just a natural phenomenon, but a profound symbol of what was unfolding. Nature seems to react to the death of the Son of God, as if creation itself were feeling the pain of separation. Scholars try to explain this seismic movement, but many agree that it goes beyond science. The tremor represents the rupture between heaven and earth, a sign that something grand and transformative was about to be revealed. It was as if God wanted to draw everyone's attention to what was about to happen. And, of course, those nearby must have been perplexed, not knowing if it was a sign of despair or a promise of renewal. The earthquake not only shook the earth, but also human emotions. For the disciples, already lost in their pain and confusion, it was a reminder that the world was changing. The symbolism of the tremor is strong. Death is not the end, but a new beginning. It is a powerful message that echoes through the centuries, resonating in the life of every believer who encounters the idea that the resurrection is the victory over death. People who heard the account of the earthquake surely shared stories and experiences. How to describe an event that mixes the supernatural with the everyday? It generated a buzz that spread quickly. What else could happen? Fear and hope coexisted in this tenuous moment, while the earth continued to tremble under their feet. If this tremor was already enough to cause a stir, what came next only increased the intensity. The resurrection of Jesus was about to be revealed, and the world would never be the same. Nature was in tune with the divine, preparing the scene for something that would change the course of human history: the opening of the tombs. And as if the earthquake were not enough, what happens next is even more extraordinary. The tombs open, and they are not just cracks in the earth, they are doors flung open to life. Many saints who had departed appear to many, as if death had lost its authority. This, according to Matthew, is a spectacle that not only surprises, but also frightens. Imagine the scene: people who were remembered only in prayers and memories now walking the streets, witnessing the resurrection of Jesus. It is a mix of awe and joy, a moment when the past merges with the present. For those who were in mourning, it must have represented a sign of renewed hope, a reminder that life triumphs over death. The symbolism here is profound. The opening of the tombs is a sign that the resurrection of Jesus is not an isolated event, but part of a larger plan of redemption. It is an anticipation of what all believers can expect: the promise of eternal life. For those living at the time, it was revolutionary, challenging established beliefs about life after death. The experience of seeing these resurrected souls must not have been easy to process. For many, it was as if the line between heaven and earth were fading. Fear and doubt were inevitable, but there was also a touch of euphoria among those who witnessed this miracle. What else could be true? The resurrection of Jesus not only defied death, but also redefined what it meant to live. This phenomenon left an indelible mark on the collective memory. The stories about the resurrected souls were told from generation to generation, a testimony to the divine power that manifested in such a tangible way. The echo of this moment would resonate in the heart of Christian faith, shaping the beliefs and hopes of the faithful for centuries. The guard at the tomb. But while all this was happening, there was a group of men who had no idea what was about to unfold. The Roman soldiers assigned to guard the tomb of Jesus were there to ensure that nothing happened. They were the last line of defense against any attempt to steal the body. But who could have imagined that their lives were about to change forever? When the angel appears and the earth's tremor intensifies, the soldiers find themselves facing a terrifying spectacle. What should have been a simple task turns into a nightmare. The presence of the angel, with his radiant light and divine authority, is something that defies any description. They, who were prepared to face rebels, are now paralyzed with fear before something they cannot control. The experience of the soldiers is emblematic. They represent those who, even in the face of visible evidence, remain skeptical. The terror they feel is a reflection of the struggle between faith and disbelief. For them, what they were witnessing was not part of their everyday reality. The idea of a body resurrecting, of a supernatural event, challenges their beliefs and understanding of power. After the encounter with the angel, the soldiers not only become witnesses, but also bearers of a powerful message. What would they do with this experience? Would they tell someone? The fear of losing their lives or facing the consequences of not fulfilling their duty weighed on them. The idea that what they saw could change the course of history left them in a state of confusion. And so, the guard at the tomb becomes a link between death and resurrection. These men, tasked with protecting what they thought was the end, become part of the narrative of the new life that was about to emerge. What could have been a simple vigil turns into a living testimony of God's power, echoing through time in the history of salvation. The angel and the stone rolled away. Imagine the scene, the sun beginning to light the horizon, and a large and heavy seal placed at the entrance of Jesus' tomb. The Romans, with their military might, thought they were ensuring that nothing happened there. But suddenly, an angel from heaven descends, with a light so intense that it seems to outshine the daylight itself. What follows is a moment of pure transformation. The stone that once seemed immovable rolls away with ease, as if it weighed less than a feather, and the tomb opens. This angel is not just a messenger, he carries the essence of divine power. His appearance is that of a glorious, radiant, and imposing being, and the sight of him provokes both fear and admiration. The celestial presence contrasts sharply with the darkness that surrounded the place. The rolled-away stone is not just a physical act of opening a sepulchre, but it symbolizes the destruction of the barriers between life and death, bringing new hope to humanity. The implications of this action go beyond what can be seen. The act of rolling away the stone represents the victory over death, a theme that will echo in Christian communities for centuries. Jesus' followers, who were previously desolate and fearful, now have a clear sign that death is not the end. This event becomes the foundation of Christian faith, a milestone that transforms despair into hope. The angel, in his message, brings the good news. He is not here, he has risen. These words resonate like an echo through time, inviting everyone to understand that the resurrection was not just for Jesus, but for all who believe in him. The rolled-away stone represents a new era, where eternal life becomes a possibility, where the resurrection becomes a symbol of renewal. The scene is so powerful that even centuries later, it still provokes intense reactions. For many, it remains a reminder that, even in the darkest situations, there is always the light of hope. Jesus' resurrection, marked by the angel's presence and the rolled-away stone, begins a new narrative in human history, one that speaks of love, redemption, and life. The appearances of Jesus. After the tumult of the resurrection, Jesus begins to appear to those he loved most. Imagine the disciples, gathered in an atmosphere filled with fear and uncertainty, when suddenly Jesus himself appears before them. It is like a dream come true, but at the same time, it seems surreal. Fear initially dominates the reactions. They wonder, is it really him? Is it a spirit? Doubt and joy intertwine in their minds. Jesus, with his comforting presence, approaches and says, "Peace be with you." These words have an almost magical effect, dissipating the fear that hung over them. He not only greets them, but also shows them the marks on his hands and feet, a testimony to the sacrifice he made. It is a scene loaded with emotion, a moment of connection that transcends human logic. Disbelief turns into worship, and from that point on, their lives are never the same. The appearances are not limited to the disciples alone. Jesus also appears to Mary Magdalene, who, in her pain and sorrow, becomes the first to witness the resurrection. Imagine the relief and joy that must have filled her upon hearing her name called by Jesus. This interaction is a powerful reminder that even in our tears, there is room for joy. Jesus chooses those considered the most humble to be the bearers of his message. These encounters are not mere manifestations, they are moments of reaffirmation of faith. Each appearance is an opportunity for Jesus to strengthen the confidence of his followers. The fear that once dominated them transforms into courage, and the message they have to share becomes clearer. The resurrection is not just an event, but a new mission, a call to spread the good news to the world. The accounts of these appearances spread quickly, and the disciples, once timid and unsure, now become bold witnesses of the resurrection. Each encounter with the risen Jesus is a confirmation that death has been defeated, and eternal life is a real promise. The reactions of fear and disbelief transform into missionary fervor, and thus, the message of the gospel begins to echo everywhere, changing lives and hearts. The proclamation of the resurrection. When the news of Jesus' resurrection began to spread, the early Christian community was in an unprecedented state of turmoil. The apostles, who had lived through days of despair and confusion after the crucifixion, found themselves facing a new reality that challenged everything they knew. Joy and disbelief intertwined in their hearts, creating a whirlwind of emotions that was difficult to process. For many, the idea that someone who had died could come back to life seemed more like a fairy tale than a palpable truth. What was a breath of hope quickly transformed into a challenge to a faith many had never imagined facing. The accounts of eyewitnesses began circulating, but doubt still lingered in the air. The apostles, in particular, struggled to understand what it all meant. They remembered Jesus' words about his death and resurrection, but now, facing the reality, the memory seemed distant. The fear of being ridiculed or even persecuted for believing in something so extraordinary also weighed heavily. What was once a united group of faith was now divided between disbelief and renewed hope. How could they proclaim a resurrection that many still considered impossible? As the news spread, reactions varied. Some were enthusiastic and ready to share the good news, while others were skeptical, questioning the truthfulness of the accounts. This mix of feelings created an environment of religious fervor, but also of division. The apostles, who were supposed to be voices of certainty, found themselves in the midst of a dilemma: how to convince others of the resurrection of someone many considered an impostor. This was a monumental task, and the weight of this responsibility was not lost on their hearts. However, the power of personal experience could not be underestimated. Those who saw the risen Jesus, who touched his wounds or shared meals with him, became powerful witnesses of the truth. They knew it was not just a story, it was the reality that transformed their lives. This personal transformation was one of the greatest testimonies the apostles could offer. And while doubts persisted, the resurrection began to become a central point of Christian faith, something that could not be ignored. The proclamation of the resurrection was not just an isolated event, it was the beginning of a new era for the Christian community. The apostles, driven by these experiences and the urgency of the message, began to gather in prayer and reflection. What was once fear and confusion was now shaping into a collective determination. They realized that the resurrection was not just an event, it was a call to live in a new way, to share a message of hope that challenged the conventions and beliefs of the time. The fulfillment of prophecies. When we talk about Jesus' resurrection, one of the most intriguing aspects is how it relates to Old Testament prophecies. For Jesus' followers, these prophecies were not mere ancient texts. They were living promises that suddenly began to take shape before their eyes. The fulfillment of these prophecies brought a new understanding of who Jesus was and what his role was in the history of humanity. For many, this was a sign that everything they had believed was indeed coming true. The connection between the resurrection and previous prophecies did not go unnoticed. Passages like Psalm 16 verse 10, which speak about the preservation of a righteous one's body, and Isaiah 53, which describes the suffering of the suffering servant, became fundamental to understanding what had occurred. The apostles began to interpret these texts in a new way, seeing in them the confirmation that Jesus was the promised Messiah. This revelation not only strengthened their faith, but also offered a solid foundation for evangelizing those who still doubted. However, this new understanding was not welcomed by all. The religious authorities and leaders of the time found these assertions challenging. The idea that Jesus, a man who had been crucified as a criminal, could be the fulfillment of God's promises was, at the very least, unsettling. This generated a wave of resistance that the apostles would have to face. Instead of merely being messengers of the good news, they became defenders of a belief that many considered heretical. This brought a new level of persecution and tension, but also a renewed determination among the early Christians. As the prophecies were fulfilled, the message of the resurrection began to transcend the boundaries of Jerusalem. Early Christian communities began to spread, bringing with them not only the story of the resurrection, but also the interpretation of the scriptures that supported it. This transformed the resurrection into a central event, not only in the apostles' lives, but in the history of the Christian faith as a whole. In each new city and village, the message echoed, the prophecies have been fulfilled, and what was considered impossible is now a reality. This interconnection between the resurrection and Old Testament prophecies not only challenged the beliefs of the time, but also shed new light on the nature of God and his plan for humanity. For many, Jesus' resurrection became a symbol of hope, that even in the darkest circumstances, the light of truth could shine. This message would continue to resonate through the centuries, offering comfort and faith to millions around the world, proving that sometimes what seems like an end is just the beginning of something extraordinary. Hey everyone! We've reached the final moment of our journey about the 5 frightening things surrounding Jesus' resurrection. But before we end, how about we reflect a little? Imagine the scene, the earth trembling, angels appearing, and the stone of the tomb rolling away. What did all this mean to those who were there? For the disciples, this event was a turning point, wasn't it? And you, what do you think about the impact of the resurrection on your life today? Does this ancient story still resonate in our hearts? Think about the promises made to us. The resurrection is not just a historical fact, it is a living hope that we can carry daily. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these events impressed you the most? And how do you believe Jesus' resurrection can transform your life? Leave your opinions in the comments. Your voice is important. And of course, don't forget to share this video with those who need to hear this powerful message. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next reflections. Until next time, and may the light of the resurrection always shine in your heart.